Okay, let's add and subtract mixed numbers. Okay, whenever they tell you to model something, it is hard to do on your own. I mean, you can draw pictures, but you never really can be exact. So I stole this model from the answer key, of course. And so they want you to model 2 1/3. Well, right here is 2 1/3. And then they want you to model adding 1 2/3. Well, here's 1 2/3. So they want you to see from this model that you can add these wholes together and you get 3. And whenever you add these pieces together, you get 3/3. Well, if you were to move this piece right here, right there, would that not make up a whole piece? So they want you to see that 3/3 is equal to 1. So really what you have here is 4 whole pieces, or whole pies, or whatever it is you're dealing with. Okay, again, so we're going to model 1 3/5 plus 2 3/5. So looking at the model, I've got 1, 2, 3 whole pieces, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, and they're cut into 5 pieces each. So what they want you to see here is that these two could be placed right here to make up a whole nother pie, and then what you have left over is this 1/5 right there. So you would have 4 1/5 when all is said and done. Okay, so here's just the steps for adding mixed numbers, and this is if they have a common denominator. So you want to add your whole numbers together, add your fractions together, and then a lot of times you will have to simplify the fraction. Okay, so in this problem right here, so you would add the 3 and the 2 together, you get 5. Then you add your numerators together, the 4 and the 2, and you get 6. Denominators never change when you're adding and subtracting. But that's not a good answer because that fraction can be simplified. They both have a factor of 3. So I'm going to divide the top by 3, and I get 2, and I'm going to divide the bottom or the denominator by 3, and I get 3. So 5 2/3 is a good simplified answer. Okay, so find the sum on this one. Add the 9 and the 5 together, I get 14. Add the 5 and the 7 together, and I get 12. Denominator does not change. And off to the side here, I need to remember that 12/9 is the same thing as 1 3/9, which is the same thing as 1 1/3. So this 12/9 becomes 1 1/3. So really I have 14 plus 1 1/3, which is the same thing as 15 1/3. Okay, there's another way that you can add these, and you can convert them, all mixed numbers, to improper fractions if you want. So I'm going to convert 3 7/8 into 8 times 3 is 24, plus 7 is 31/8 is what 3 7/8 became. Now I'm going to convert 4 3/8 into improper fractions. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 3 is 35. Don't change your denominator. Now just add your numerators together, and you get 66/8. Now it's a matter of reducing that. I know that since they're both even, that 2 will at least go in, so I get 33/4. That's a great answer. You can leave it as 33/4. I'd be perfectly happy with that answer. Or if you want to change that to a mixed number, either one of these two that I have put a square or box around would get you full credit on a test with me. Okay, on this one, they want you to use a model to subtract. So on 1, I'm going to turn 1 into something that is cut into 3 pieces. That's one whole piece right there. And I'm going to take away one of those. So if I have one whole piece and I take away 1/3 of those, I am left with 2/3. Now let me show you how to do this without a model. So what I would want to do is I would want to turn that 1 into something over 3 so that we have a common denominator with that right there. And how I make 1 into something over 3 is I just put whatever the denominator is on top. So 3/3 is equal to 1, it's an equivalent fraction, minus 1/3, 3 minus 1 is 2, so there's the other way to do that. Okay, take a look at this one right here. I'm not going to use a model this time, I'm just going to do this the way that I would normally do this on paper. So I'm going to turn 2 into something that has a denominator of 4. So what would that numerator have to be? Well, really I had to multiply the bottom by 4, so I need to multiply the top by 4 as well. So 8/4 is the same thing as 2. So I've got 8/4 minus 3/4. 8 minus 3 is 5/4. I like 5/4. I would take 5/4 for full credit on a test. But if you gave me 1 1/4, I would take that as well for full credit. Okay, so for this problem right here, 2 minus 1 2/5. Okay, so this one can be done in several different ways. I could turn, let's see here, I'm going to write it vertically first. I always do, whenever I'm doing mixed numbers, I always write them vertically. I cannot stand it whenever they're written side by side. A lot of people have a different preference on that. This is just my preference. Okay, so I know that I want something right here. And it needs to be something that I can take 2/5 away from. So I'm going to borrow 1, and that becomes a 1 right there. And what I just borrowed is 5/5. Now the reason why I created 5/5 there, I borrowed 1 whole, and I wanted something with a denominator of 5. And so a whole with a denominator of 5 is 5/5. So now I can just subtract my fractions and I can subtract my whole numbers. 5/5 minus 2/5 is 3/5. 1 minus 1 is 0, so I'm not going to put anything in front of that. 3/5 is my answer here. Okay, so you may want to hit pause here and take a look and see what all this says. I'm not going to read it to you. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Find the difference. 5 3/5 minus 2 4/5. Again, I always write this vertically first. So 5 3/5 minus 2 4/5. Okay, so I want to take, you always deal with your fractions first, so I want to take 4 away from 3, but I know this isn't going to be a negative number. The reason why I know that is because if I were to ignore the fractions altogether, 5 minus 2 is a positive number. So this can't be negative. So I have to borrow. And so whenever I borrow, I'm going to borrow 1 from right there. So that becomes 4. Now remember, what I just borrowed is 5/5. I borrowed a whole piece. And so you have to add the 5/5 to the 3/5, and I get 4 8/5. Now think about that for just a second. Is 4 8/5 the same thing or equivalent to 5 3/5? Yes, it is. So the cheap and easy way is you add this plus this and it becomes your numerator right there. Once you borrow, you add your denominator to your numerator, it becomes your new numerator. That's cheap and easy. Alright, so now let's subtract. I don't know where that line just came from. Hang on. Okay, malfunction's over. Alright, so minus 2 4/5. So now I'm going to subtract 4/5 from 8/5, and I get 4/5. 4 minus 2 is 2. So my final answer is 2 4/5. Okay, another way that you can work these problems is that you can convert them into improper fractions. So again, I always write them vertically. So 9 6/11 minus 7 10/11. And I'm going to turn both of these into impropers. So 11 times 9 is 99. 99 plus 6 is 105 over 11. Minus 11 times 7 is 77. Plus 10 is 87. And so now I want to subtract 105 minus 87. 15 minus 7 is 8, so I get 18. 18/11ths. I like 18/11ths. I would accept that answer for full credit. But if you wanted to give me the mixed number, I would take that as well for full credit. Okay, so what happens when our denominators aren't the same? Well, then we have to create equivalent fractions and get denominators that are same. So I would, again, write these vertically. 2 1/2 plus 5 2/3. And I want something with a common denominator of, think about it, between 2 and 3. What's the common denominator? It's going to be 6. So if I have to multiply this 2 right here by 3, I've got to multiply this by 3. So my numerator becomes, on the top, 3. And on the bottom fraction, I had to multiply this by 2. So I've got to multiply that by 2. So I get 4 there. So now let's add our numerators together. 3 and 4 is 7. Don't change your denominator. 2 plus 5 is 7. Now, I would not take this answer for full credit because you have an improper fraction mixed in with a mixed number. And that's not good. That's not proper form. So you either want to have all impropers or all mixed numbers, but you can't have them together. So I'm going to turn 7/6 off to the side here. 7/6 is the same thing as 1 1/6. And if I add that to the 7 right there, so I get 8 1/6. Okay, so what about this one? 4 3/4 minus 2 7/8. Start off writing this thing vertically. 4 3/4 minus 2 7/8. So I want you to think about this for just a second. Think about whether or not this answer is going to be positive or negative. And ignore the fraction. 4 minus 2 is going to be a positive number. So this answer is going to be positive. You should not get a negative answer with this. So I do want a common denominator. And what is the common denominator between 4 and 8? It's 8. So this becomes 4 6/8. 2 7/8. That didn't change at all. But look at that. I can't take 7/8 away from 6/8. So I have to borrow 1. So I'm going to borrow 1 from this right here. That becomes a 3. And remember the cheap and easy way that I taught you just a little bit ago? 8 plus 6 turns into 14. So now we can subtract. 14 minus 7 is 7. Denominator doesn't change. 3 minus 2 is 1. So 1 7/8 is our final answer on this problem. Okay, for a problem like this, I will rarely ever deal with a mixed number because I tend to mess things up all the time whenever I try to deal with mixed numbers. So I will convert this completely to an improper fraction. So I'm going to convert 3 5/11. Now, the reason why I say that is because I know that this answer is going to be negative. 3 minus 4 is a negative number. So I know this answer is going to be negative. That's why I really and truly recommend converting this to an improper fraction before you deal with it. So 11 times 3 is 33, plus 5 is 38. Minus 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus 3 is 19. Okay, so now I need to get a common denominator though. And so common denominator between 11 and 4 is 44. So I have to multiply this by 4. That means I've got to multiply that by 4. 38 times 4, 152. So I get 152 over 44 there. Now, the bottom, to get it to be 44, I have to multiply by 11. So I've got to multiply the top by 11. So off to the side here, 19 times 11 and I get 209. So now I'm going to subtract. So 152 minus 209. With the rule on this, if signs are different, and they are, you subtract the smaller from the larger, keep the sign of the larger number. So I know I'm going to have a negative number. I know that it's going to be over 44, and off to the side I'm going to do 209 minus 152, and I get 57. Negative 57 over 44. Now, I'm going to ask myself if that can be reduced. And it can't, except you can turn it into a mixed number if you want. So this would turn into negative 1, and you would have 13/44 left over. I really do like this one better.